So we are in book number 7 within the Madras series, and the name of this book is entitled True Love. Now, this book, oh my gosh, try to keep up because it's a lot that's happening in this particular book. It's a very busy book. It's a lot of characters, a lot of drama, a lot of tying and twisting, and I was a bit confused. Like, this time in this book, she had too many characters in this book and a lot happening and a lot going on that sometimes I was just getting confused. I was like, this is going to be kind of difficult to review, but not so much. Okay. So in this edition within this series, this is dealing with Nicholas Chenault. Of course, we know about Nicholas Chenault. He is the younger brother of Sterling Hamilton, the popular actor who's very bigger than life. He's well known, and he's kind of like this ladies' man or whatever, but not anymore. But anyways, that's his older brother, Sterling Hamilton, and he recently has been kind of like forming this long-awaited bond with his brother, and this been going strong for 10 months now. So he recently found out that he had a superstar brother that he didn't know about all these years, and they're trying to mend that. Now, the reason that he's come into knowing Sterling or about Sterling Hamilton is through their mother, which is Angeline Chenault. Now, she had some health issues that were going on, and she thought that her life was coming to an end. So she kind of wanted to right her wrongs and just get everything out in the open. And that's when she divulged this information to her son, Nicholas, the truth and everything that was going on. Thank goodness she's okay. She's healthy, alive, and well now at this current time in her life. But it kind of like was a blessing in disguise because it brought out the truth and it mended all of their relationship together. Now, when their mother, Angeline Chenault, was younger, when she was 17 years old, she just thought that she wanted more out of life. She wanted the finer things in life. She was so much more interested in money versus love at that time. She was 17, so you can attribute to her the choices to her young age and lack of maturity. So anyway, Sterling has forgiven her, and they're all just one big happy family now and doing well. Now, the love interest. This is a new girl on the scene. She was not spoken of in the previous series within this book collection here. This is the first we've ever heard about this character. We kind of like are introduced to Shayla Kirkland. Now, Shayla Kirkland is 26 years old and she resides in Chicago. Now, she has an MBA from Harvard and she's fluent in 4 different languages. She knows Chinese, Spanish, French, Swahili, and I think, well, that's it. Yeah, that's 4. And she has a letter of recommendation from Howard University, which speaks volumes about her and her communication skills and how superb they are. So the girl is excellent. She is just intelligent, she's smart, and she's beautiful. Now, her late mother was this woman named Eva Foster Kirkland. Now, she died 2 weeks ago in a car accident. But when her mother died, of course, when she was gathering her things and, just picking up her belongings, up in the attic, she discovered her mother's diary. Okay? And when she read her mother's diary, she discovered a whole lot of things that she was not aware of. Now, when she read her mother's diary, she was thinking that this man who practically raised her, but she was thinking that this man named Glenn Kirkland was her biological father. That's what she was thinking, but he died 2 years ago from lung cancer. So she didn't know that this man was not biologically her father until after her mother passed. And she read in her diary that when she was 10 weeks pregnant, Glenn took her in and fathered a child that didn't belong to him. Now, actually, he couldn't have kids. And during that time, Glenn and her mother, Eva, somehow, some way, they were dating, but something happened where they got separated. I don't know if Glenn went into the service or something. Anyways, they were separated for a long time. And during that gap, Shayla's mother ended up messing around with this man named Thomas Jordash. Excuse me. Now, this man, Thomas Jordash, is who Shayla believes is her father after reading the diary. Yeah, she discovered that, of course, Glenn was not her father, even though he raised her and father figure she had in her life and all that she knew. She still respects that, but now she believes that Thomas Jordash is her father because it's in the diary that when she was pregnant and she told Thomas Jordash that she was pregnant, he encouraged her to get an abortion. So that kind of like scarred her mother and left her feeling hurt. And so she was so hurt by that and the betrayal of this guy that she ended up leaving. And then when she left, she ended up meeting Glenn Kirkland and, well, reconnecting with Glenn Kirkland, excuse me. And he ended up just marrying her anyway, with knowing that she was 10 weeks pregnant. So that's that. So with her discovering how her mother died and the history between Thomas Jordash and the company that her mother was working at. Now, the company that her mother was working at for a long time, she ended up getting fired from Chenault Electronics. Yeah, she ended up getting fired from there, all because of some mess. Some mess that had got out, and it was some lies and some deceit, and it kind of like dishonored her mother's name, her character, her reputation, and all of that. So she wanted to get revenge on this guy named Thomas Jordash, who owned JT Electronics. So she has an agenda, and this is where she runs into Nicholas, because Nicholas Chenault is now taking over his father's business, who is now deceased, and he's been deceased for 3 years. So before I get into all of that, I also want to say now Shayla has an aunt, and her aunt name is Callie Foster. Now, Callie is the sister of her mother, who is deceased, and they were very close sisters. They were just peas in a pod, and Shayla always admired how beautiful Callie Foster is, because Callie is beautiful and she's smart, and her aunt owned like this popular clothing store, so she appreciated that her aunt Callie would be able to give her the latest trends and fashion and just keep her looking good and dressing nice, and just the envy of all the kids at school, because she was just always decked out in beautiful attire because her aunt owned this amazing clothing company or whatnot. So she always looked up to her aunt and kind of like considered her like a second mother because of how close she was to her. So she always admired her as a woman and how much, she looks so good for her age. Because I think she's 47. Yeah, she was the youngest sister of her mother. That was her younger sister, and they were 4 years apart. So yeah, she just said, wow, for her aunt to be 47 years old, she could easily pass for a woman in her early 30s, and how well she aged. And she just attributed those good looks also to genetics, and then how her aunt always took care of herself. She would exercise and eat right, and her diet was good. So she just kept up with herself, but she would always admire her. So Callie, of course, with her being close with her mother, Shayla's mother, Callie knew a lot that was going on. And she never shared with Shayla, of course, this secret stuff that is now starting to unfold. So after Shayla reads the diary up in the attic, she comes down, and of course Callie is like, oh, what's wrong? And things like that. And Shayla was like, I just read my mom's diary, and I'm discovering about this guy named Thomas Jordash, who is my father. And of course, Callie is panicking because she was like, oh gosh, she found that out. What else is this girl going to find out? Because there is a whole lot of secrets that when I discovered what really was taking place, I kind of like did I was so shocked. But this is a whole bunch of drama. But so she was sharing with Callie how she feels and how she wants to get revenge on this Thomas Jordash, who owns the JT Electronics. And she also wants to get revenge on Chenault Electronics. So she tells her aunt what she plans to do. And what she plans to do is go to Chenault Electronics to land a job there. So she wants to work there so that she can get in good, be trusted, and then go in for the kill. And so Callie is kind of like nervous because she knows all the history behind Chenault Electronics and this Thomas Jordash, and she knows that more web of lies is going to be unraveled. So she's nervous, and she was like, I don't think that that's a good idea. Like, you need to think about what you're doing. You don't really know the story. Blase. She's just really trying to encourage her. And Shayla's like, I don't know why you're trying to discourage me. Like, this happened to my mom. They did her wrong at this company. They had all of her dignity, her pride stripped away, and I'm going to represent her. I know my mom was the, peaceful type and the peacemaker, and she tried to do that woosah stuff, but Shayla's not like that. She wants to get revenge, and she couldn't understand why her aunt wasn't in support of it. But nonetheless, Callie was like, just be careful. You don't know what you're doing. Just don't do it. But anyway, Shayla is determined. Now, this is where she meets Nicholas. Now, Nicholas, of course, is taking over his father's business. His father's business was first formed 35 years ago. So he's been running this business for a long time. Now, I think actually at first it was like a corner store. And Nicholas transitioned it from that corner store to an electronic company. So that's how this Chenault Electronics has taken place. So he's running that, and he's doing well or whatever. And so with Nicholas, when his father died, this guy named Paul Dunlap comes into play. Now, this is why I say it's too many things going on here. But Paul Dunlap was Nicholas' father's best friend. That was his confidant. They were like brothers. They were like closer than close. And they were so close that Nicholas actually considered Paul Dunlap a second father. He looked up to him like that. Now, Paul actually was there from the beginning. Paul worked at his father's business and been with their company for 30 years as the head security. But at this time, Paul, since he's been there for 30 years, he's thinking it's time for him to retire. So he's telling Nicholas that he's considering it quits because he's done his due diligence and he just wants to retire and just want to spend the rest of his time just traveling and doing what he wants to do. So, of course, Nicholas, you really don't want the man to go. He wants him to stay around because he's been doing pretty good as the head security there, keeping everything intact. So he was like, well, you got a year left. So I'm going to bring on this guy named Carl Stockert. And we're going to bring him in because we need to hire someone that's going to be in your stead. You can kind of train him and keep an eye on him to see if he's going to be trustworthy, because actually Nicholas didn't trust anyone more than he trusted Paul. Paul earned his trust. He was always there and he knows him. So of course he'll trust Paul's decision on whether or not this new guy that's coming in named Carl Stockert would be a good fit or not. So he was like, okay, well, I will keep an eye on him and check him out. And, I think you'll have a good replacement. So, yeah, now here's where it also gets to be filled with drama. Now, a lot of people have something against this Thomas Jordache, it looks like. So Paul's sister used to be married to Thomas Jordache. Okay. Now, the reason why he has something against Thomas Jordache is because his sister ended up dying giving birth to their son. Now, Thomas knew of Thomas, see, this is why there's too much going on. Thomas knew about Paul's sister's health challenges. She should have never gotten pregnant in the first place. But because of, what's that fool's name? Thomas Jordache, selfish ways, he was too busy thinking about a dynasty and having a son or whatever, that he ended up getting her pregnant anyway, and she ended up dying, giving birth to his son, Trent Jordache. Now, here's where it also gets messy, okay? So this makes Paul, that's Paul's nephew by law. That's his nephew. So, of course, Paul has something against Thomas because you're the dummy who ended up making my sister die. You got her pregnant when you shouldn't have in the first place. So he was angry at him. So, of course, Thomas, he didn't want Paul having any relationship with Trent. And at the time when Trent Jordache was younger, he kept their relationship from ever forming or having one at all because they were at odds with each other. But when Trent became of age and he became a man and came into his own, that's where Paul and Trent's relationship was kind of like rekindled, and they're closer than close now. Like when he got of age, he was able to make his own decisions and decided that he wanted Paul to be, he wanted a relationship with Paul because, by law, they were, that was his nephew or whatever. So they're close. It's just too much going on, like I said. Now, Nicholas and Trent ended up being best friends, but they didn't know that both of their fathers were enemies until later when they got into college. But they've been friends, like the best of friends. But of course, when Thomas got wind of his son Trent befriending Nicholas, who was kind of like Thomas' enemy because of Nicholas' father, because they was at each other's throat. Now, honestly, Alan Shinault, he was not the more dominant one. He was cool. He didn't want no drama. He didn't want no beef. He didn't want no competition. But it was Thomas who felt like he was competition. He wanted to stay on top. So he felt like he had to do undermining, underhanded things to stay on top, cutthroat things to stay on top. So when he knows that his son is befriending the enemy, so to speak, he tried over a course of years to kind of like sabotage Trent and Nicholas' friendship. Thank goodness that never works. And so after Thomas realized that, okay, I can't destroy their friendship because they're still stronger than ever, he decided to stop trying to sabotage their relationship. And besides, at this point in Thomas Jordash's life, he just decided a long time ago after that it wasn't worth the hassle to keep going back and forth with trying to sabotage Shinault Electronics. He just decided that let bygones be bygones. I'm not going to keep doing this back and forth thing. So for a while, he's just been laying low. He's been kind of chill and cool, but there's still bad blood, even though Thomas Jordash has been cool, hasn't been doing anything or nothing like that. There's still bad blood. So, of course, every time Paul sees Thomas, that man gets under his skin because of what he did. And not only did Thomas Jordash do that, he hurt Paul in another way as well. This is why I say there's too much going on. Thomas, like I said, Shayla's mother, Eva, she was messing with Thomas. Okay. And at the time, Paul was dating Shayla's sister, who was her aunt Callie. So Paul was messing with Callie. Okay? They were dating. And with this scandal going on with Shayla's mother and Thomas Jordash made it appear that Shayla's mother, Eva, was giving information about Shinault Electronics, okay? So when Paul got wind of this, he thought that she had something to do with the reason why there was conflict of interest. And he, instead of believing Eva, he blamed her, he didn't believe her, and he said some not so nice things. And not only that, to add insult to injury, he actually thought that Callie, the woman that he was seeing and dating, who he was in love with, and he knew Callie was in love with him, but he even thought that she was the culprit as being connected to all of this, that she too was involved with her sister. So he cut things off with her, said some nasty things to her. And they kind of ended on a bad note. He didn't give Callie a chance to explain anything, to state her claim, or none of that. He didn't want to hear anything. So they kind of leave on bad terms, and it was just an ugly situation. And so now fast forward, it's 27 years later. He still didn't get answers, but over the course of those years, he discovered that, in fact, Eva and Callie were both innocent, but when pride gets in the way, at this point it's too late, and he made a fool of himself, and he just felt like the damage was done, and there's nothing that he could do to untie it. So he's kind of been living with this regret and this sadness that he feels for not believing her, kind of like leaving that all inside. But it's funny how life always connect us back up with the people that we were destined to be connected with. Now, this is where Shayla comes in at. So she goes up to Chenault Electronics. That's a hard name to pronounce. But anyways, Nicholas' company. And he's looking for a person for this position. I believe that her position, or the job description that she has or was applying for, is to be an international affairs manager. So, now a little bit about Nicholas. If I didn't mention, he's 32 years old. And the background of his love life, he was seeing this one woman. I forget her name. But he was seeing this one woman, and he was seeing her for about a year. And then a year in, she was hinting around that she wanted something more, something serious. And Nicholas wasn't looking for that. So when she started putting pressure on him and he wouldn't budge or give in to it, she decided that she needed to leave him, and she left him to go search for someone who was on her same wavelength and wanted what she wanted. And he didn't, like, when he was messing with that girl, he didn't feel anything. You know, here he was with this girl for a whole year, had never told her he loved her, or it just was no connection for him. It was just all sex, which some men can do that, I guess. But anyways, so it's been about a year or two since he has last been in a relationship. And actually, the last time that he was intimate, because he kind of like devoted all his time into his work and his business, and just making sure that that's secure and that it's running effectively and efficiently. And he just didn't have the time and energy to put that towards a woman. So he thought. So anyways, so Shayla comes and he's interviewing her for this position at the job. And Paul actually saw her being interviewed. And immediately when he saw her, he just was like, I mean, he noticed that she was attractive and beautiful, but he wasn't looking at her in that manner. He was just noticing her. So he kind of glances at her or whatever. And after that interview, of course, well, during the interview, obviously, right off the bat, from the gate, Nicholas was very much captivated by how beautiful she was, and not just only aesthetically beautiful, but she was very highly intelligent. Like, her resume was through the roof, like raving colors. She had every reason to fill this position, and she was probably overqualified for the position. And he knew that given her expertise and her level of knowledge and skills, that she would be a wonderful asset to the business. But he was thinking all the while he was interviewing her, that he couldn't hire her because he was beginning to think about, like, gosh, she's so gorgeous. I always made it a habit not to sleep with my employees or get involved with them. And he could feel that she was going to be an issue and a problem. So he, even though she was passing this interview with flying colors, he had every intention on not hiring her because he was like, I just can't, I'll cut it too close. Like having her work here would just not be a good thing for him. And so, anyways, he told her after the interview or whatnot, he would get in touch with her or whatever. And so, of course, Shayla, she's there for a motive and an agenda, and she's looking to get revenge. So she's wearing her game face and she's playing the part and trying to be nice because she has to get her foot in the door, and not only get her foot in the door, but get him to trust her and gain his trust so she can learn the ins and out of his business to ruin it. So she's playing her part or whatever, and so she leaves. And Paul, he comes and he said, yeah, I mean, I see you interviewed her, and Paul actually had a chance to glance at her credentials, and he was like, and according to her credentials, she would be a great asset for this position to work here. And he was like, yeah, but I don't, I'm not going to hire her. And actually, I want you to write up a letter stating that she's not a good fit. And Paul was like, are you kidding me? Like, you can't be serious. Like, her credentials they can't be denied. It's undeniable. Like, why wouldn't you hire her? And he was like, oh, I get it. You won't hire her because you're afraid that you would want to sleep with her. And he was just, he was teasing Nicholas or whatever because he could pick up on how attracted Nicholas was to this girl. Because trust me, he knows Nicholas. He's been around Nicholas all Nicholas' life and consider him like a son almost. So he knows Nicholas. So anyways, Nicholas is trying to deny that that's not the reason. He just said it's just not a good fit. But Paul was very adamant and consistent about him reconsidering his decision not to hire her. And so he does. He goes home and he starts thinking about everything and trying to convince himself that he'd be able to put aside his own desires and wants and go ahead and hire her, because I mean he couldn't deny himself that she would be a great asset to the business. And so he decided, instead of writing up the letter of denial, that he was going to go ahead and give her a call, because she was well versed, in different languages and things like that. And he actually said, well, I actually need her because he's not very fluent in Chinese, speaking Chinese. And he needed her level of expertise in speaking Chinese because he needed to have a business trip or a business meeting with some very important guy in Hong Kong. So he tells her, or have his secretary Leanne call and offer her the job. And also, not only that, Leanne, his secretary, tells her, need to pack your bags and get ready, which I hope is not an inconvenience, but Nicholas, Mr. Shinault, would like you to join him on a business trip. I think that same night, or first thing in the morning, you fly out to go to Hong Kong on this assignment, on this deal over there that he was needing her help with. And she was kind of like taken off guard. She was like, wow, like what? And she was like, yeah, I know it's short notice, but if you want the job, you just kind of like have to comply to that. And she was like, well, I guess she has to suck it up and do what it takes to get in there. So she go ahead and she agrees and said that she will have her bags packed or whatnot and be on her way to Hong Kong. And she was like, also, there are some papers that you would need to go over and study, which actually she brought with her at home. No, she had to pick them up so that on her way to Hong Kong, she can kind of study a little bit of the history and background of deal that they're going to seal over there in Hong Kong. So, yeah, she has to do that. So, of course, when she discovers that she is going to go to Hong Kong, she calls Callie, her aunt Callie, and tell her that she has to go to Hong Kong on short notice. And of course, Callie was like, "Oh my goodness, like that is a short notice." But she was like, "Well, how long are you going to be gone for?" And I think she was going to be over there for a week. Yeah, for a week. And she was like, "Oh, wow, that's a long time." And she was like, "Well, you be careful. And if I were you, don't do anything stupid or wrong." And she said, "You never know. You might end up actually falling in love with him after you get to know him." And she was like, Why would you say such a silly thing like that to her aunt?" But her aunt, I don't know her. I don't know if her aunt is like a helpless romantic, but she could kind of pick up on something. Because, I mean, even though she had plans and an agenda to destroy this man, she just had a feeling that she was going to actually fall in love with him. Because the story was sounding all too familiar to her Aunt Callie, which I'm going to unfold everything a little bit later. So, anyways, she was like, whatever, whatever. And she hung up with her aunt. So she's on a plane and she's got her material and she's going over a little bit about the business with this Ming Ling deal over in Hong Kong that they're looking to secure. Now, there was some type of new technology that Nicholas was looking to kind of like introduce that was going to be changing and very innovative. And so he needed to partner with them in Hong Kong because, of course, the people in Hong Kong, they're further advanced and they're tech savvy and they know what to do to take that next step with his idea and goal. So that's why he's over there. It was some type of chip he was getting involved with or creating that was going to take his business to the next level, and financially they were just going to just skyrocket through the roof even more. So yeah, so she's studying that. She was like, okay, that sounds like a great idea. That's more money. Once I get in and take it over, that could be more money for her. So yeah, so she's studying and doing her homework and everything like that. So she gets to Hong Kong and she notices immediately how beautiful Hong Kong is. And she just oversaw the skyline and it's just gorgeous and how luxurious the hotel is and just everything about it. Just the scenery is so beautiful. Like her room is gorgeous, it's luxurious. It's just, she hadn't seen anything like that. Like she was expecting something entirely different in Hong Kong, but she was just in awe of how beautiful it was. Like she couldn't believe it. And it was just breathtakingly gorgeous and beautiful. So she's there enjoying that or whatever. And actually, when she first arrived into China at the airport, Nicholas had sent a limo to just take her back to this hotel that he reserved. Now, the hotel that he reserved is a well known, luxurious hotel in China. It was called the Conrad International Hotel, and he reserved an entire executive floor. And the reason why he did that, I think, is because, well, this is quite some introduction for Shayla, for her to first she's coming on board and on short notice, I'm asking her to have a business trip with me to Hong Kong and it's going to be a week long. So I think he wanted to make it extra comfortable for her and then he was attracted to her. So I think he wanted to make a good impression. But he also reserved it because it was going to be Nicholas, Paul, and Shayla sharing that floor. So, yeah, and the reason why he brought Paul was because it was for security measures and they had to be taken. So Paul, who better fit for this job than Paul? So, and I think Paul was not going to be there until like the next day or something like that. So anyways, so he's there. He was like thinking about her and how beautiful she is. He really couldn't stop thinking about her. And he was just trying to figure out why he was excited and antsy and anxious about her being there or whatever. So he's kind of like trying to get his mind off of her. So he figured that he wanted to go to the mini bar and pour himself a drink or whatever to kind of like relax him or whatever, just to try to get his mind off of her, but that didn't work. And so Shayla, she decided that after the long flight, she wanted to just kind of like unwind and relax. So she just decides to soak in the luxurious tub and just kind of reflect on her first initial meeting with Nicholas. And she was thinking about the interview, and then she was thinking about how she noticed Paul. It was something about him that she couldn't put her finger on, but he made her nervous. Because actually, when when Nicholas was interviewing her, he also introduced Shayla to Paul. And upon meeting him, she was a little nervous or whatever, and she felt like Paul was picking up on her being nervous and was like going to try to be suspicious of her. So that's why she was nervous. She didn't know what it was, but it was just something about him that made her nervous. So she was thinking about that, reflecting on that, and understanding that all of them were on this whole executive floor and that there were 3 suites, one for Nicholas, one for Paul, and one for her. And so she was like, well, at least I get a chance to unwind and relax and I will have to see him tonight. But she was like, but then again, stranger things have happened, especially upon short notice. So she was kind of like going to be prepared. And sure enough, the phone rang. So she gets out of the tub and she went over there and answered the phone. And of course, it was Nicholas, and he was asking her, how was your flight, Miss Kirkland? And she was like, her heart started beating her chest because when she initially saw Nicholas, she was attracted to him, like highly attracted to him. But she was like, I'm not going to let no attraction deter me from what I'm here to do. But she just didn't understand, like every time that she heard his voice or thought of him or see him, she was just acting like something that she didn't understand at the time or at the moment. So anyways, he was asking her, how was your flight or whatever, and she was like, it was good. And he was like, did you go over the material? Did you get a chance to read it? And she was like, yeah, and it was rather long and interesting. He was like, good. And he kind of like chuckled or whatever. And she was smiling too. And he was like, but you completed it, right? You completed the Ling Deal material. And she was like, unfortunately, I didn't have much of a choice. And yes, she thoroughly read over the details. And he was like, well, good. He said, because in the morning we have a meeting with the Hong Kong people. And it's going to be right here on this floor. Because there's like a meeting room on that executive floor. And she was like, oh, okay, is there anything else you need to tell me or that I need to know? And he was like, yeah, I like to go over these things with you. And I was wondering if you would like to have a business dinner tonight. And she was like, okay, that's fine. Just give me a second. I'll be right there, whatever. And he was like, good. And So he was like, well, really, I mean, if you were in the middle of something, it don't have to be right now. He was like, how about 7 o'clock? Will that work for you? You can come downstairs, or should I meet you at your door, or what? And she was like, no, 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 that's cool. He was like, are you sure? He said, because I'm right, you know that we're right across the hall from each other. And she was like, oh boy. So she was like, okay, that'll be fine. He said, well, yeah, at 7 o'clock, I'll be over there. I'll walk right across my room to come get you, and we'll go downstairs. And she was like, okay. So, anyways, he came right at 7 o'clock, and he was just like, when I opened the door, um, this dress that she had on was so amazing. It actually was the dress that she got from her Aunt Callie's clothing store. All the clothes she wears, she buys it from her Aunt Callie. So she was just looking so beautiful in her dress, and he was just like, man, he was caught off guard, and he just couldn't help that. He was just staring at her. And he was like, man, I need to focus. And when she saw him, she could not deny that this brother looked so good in his gray suit. She just, ooh, she was like, this man is everything. Like, she was like, this man is fine. He's sensuous, he's sexy, and he's looking good in this suit. And then his eyes, like, she really loved his eyes. He have like these light brown golden eyes, his eye color. She was just like, like, she was just feeling like how he was feeling. So she was like, well, are you ready? He was like, sure, I'm ready. So they walked to the elevator. And while they're in this elevator, they're just vibing off of each other's attraction, and this heat that they're feeling is mutual. And the look that they were giving one another, it was just, there's nothing that needed to be said. It was just sensuous vibes flowing between both of them. It was thick, and it was just like this deep fog in the air between them. And she wasn't really overjoyed with the sexual tension that was radiating between them, because it put her off guard. So she was like, okay, this is business. This is all business. And she was in control. And she was just trying to talk herself like back to her senses of why she was there. She had to control it. So she was trying to control it. So anyways, they're just there, like, just admiring how good they look. And so they go downstairs, and they begin to relax the more that they were around them, and so around each other, excuse me. And so he's trying to lighten the mood, and he was just asking her, did she take a nap? And she was just saying, a few times I did. And but she's catching jet lag and all of that. And he said, I know the feeling, because I'm getting it too. And so they're there at the restaurant, and they're looking around and how beautiful it is, or whatever. And there's something that he did. He got kind of close to her as he was like opening the chair for her, and he set her down, and his lips went close to her ear, and he was trying to capture her and telling her to have a seat. And immediately, like, when he touched her, sparks, it just began to fly. Like, his touch was just radiating through her body. And it was like, oh my gosh. And he picked up on how she was reacting to his touch. So he was like, all right. And so, anyway, Shayla, because remember I told you that she was fluent in Chinese. Well, the people there, everybody that was looking at them, she heard them speak in Chinese, how gorgeous of a couple that they both were and how immaculately dressed that they were and how good they looked together. But of course, Nicholas is not that versed in Chinese. And so she was glad that Nicholas didn't really understand what they were saying in Chinese, because she didn't want him even having an idea as them as being a couple or anything as such. And so Nicholas, he was like, well, I hope you like Chinese food. And so he started smiling, and she was like, well, I mean, I would prefer something else, but the food is kind of heaven, so we'll just enjoy this food. And so they're just smiling at one another. And so he tells Shayla that he wanted to personally apologize to her, for pulling her away from Chicago on such a short notice. And of course, she didn't mind it, because after all, she did want the job and she had to comply if she wanted the gig. So she said that that was fine or whatever. And he said, but I really needed your help with negotiations that's about to take place. And she was like, well, what do you mean? Because when she read the contract or whatever, she was thinking that basically that was a done deal that she was looking over, and she thought that maybe he wanted her to make sure that she was going to tie any loose ends just in case, she was out of the loop on something. Because she said, that report alluded to, this is a deal done. And he was like, I was hoping that it was true, but he said, as a businessman, I've learned to always look for surprises in the last stages of negotiations. And he said, and actually, one of the men who will be at the meeting tomorrow is this smooth Chinese businessman and somebody he had to watch out for. So, and he was like, and then besides, he understands that most Chinese men don't too much like to do business or too much care about American men. Well, I don't want to say that it's just American men. It's just Americans in general. They're not as lenient with Americans just in general, but they're a lot easier on women. Let me just say that. And so they're talking business or whatever and all of that. And then Nicholas, he wanted to kind of shift the conversation, because at this point, he just wants to get down to who she is and a little bit more about her. So he was kind of like insinuating, or trying to find out rather, if she had a significant other. And he says, well, I hope I didn't upset your significant other back in the States for pulling you away. And she kind of picked up on, like, no, this Negro didn't. Like, he's trying to find out if I have someone. And so she was like, well, I don't have a significant other or anything like that, so that won't be a problem. And he was like, well, she was like, the only special person I have is my Aunt Callie, who's my mom's younger sister. She's all the family I have and the only person who's important to me. So you don't have to worry about anybody else. And which, when she said that to him, that kind of reminded her of why she's there. So it put her back into the scheme of things, as far as like recentering her attention to why she's there and what she wants to do. So she tries to turn it back to business. And she just asked him, she said, so what are our chances with this Ling deal being closed for tomorrow? And I guess he was like, I think it'll be pretty successful depending on how we handle things or whatnot. And they're just keeping it on a business level. So after dinner is over with, she is kind of like reminiscing. And she kind of like submerged herself into the bathtub once again. And she wanted to just soak there and just reflect on things. So she's just there and she's closing her eyes and she's remembering how well the night went. except for when Nicholas was trying to get personal and asking her about, her love life, if she had a significant other or whatever. So she was kind of thinking about that, and she was hoping that that wouldn't happen again, that they could keep things on a business type level. But she was still thinking like, dang, but he's so fine though. And she was just noticing everything about his features, his eyes, just everything about him. It was so sensuous to her. So she couldn't get enough of that. She couldn't deny that. So she started fantasizing about him. She said, well, since this is not really going to happen, I might as well have some fun, and I might as well have some fantasies in my mind about what it would be like to sleep with him. So she's in the bathtub just fantasizing about how it would feel to make love to him and kiss him and caress him and do all the things that she just wanted him to do, but can't do because she has an agenda, and she's just wrestling with this. And she started getting really turned on, and ooh, she was just moist, and just, she had this frantic hunger for him. Like, she could not deny this attraction. And Shayla has never been intimate with any man before. Like I said, she's only 26 years old, and she spent most of her time with her studies and studying and going to school and becoming something of herself. And 26 is still a young age to not have been with someone before. But the way that she was thinking about him, she was thinking like, man, he could be my first. But then she was like, that would be harmful because I'll be sleeping with the enemy. And that's something that she could never do because she was on a mission. And she said, if anybody's going to suffer, it's going to be Nicholas. But it still did not hurt her to fantasize because that felt so good. So anyways, Nicholas, he's in his room. Now, mind you, Nicholas, too, has spent most of his life invested into his business, his career, his studies. Now, he was seeing a woman, but over those course of years and time that he was with her or just with other women, it was always something sexual, something casual, nothing more than that, because he never really would dig a woman like that, not to that extent where she left a mark on him. But when it comes to Shayla, he is just something about that woman that he cannot shake. He's never, in all of his 32 years of living, never been kind of shook like that. Never wanted a woman so much like that. Like, he was just like, man, she is such a distraction. I just don't know what I'm going to do. We got this business meeting tomorrow. I hope I can stay focused. And he's just going through it because he was like, there's a lot of money at stake. So I just can't, I can't lose focus. I got to, come on, pull through. So he's trying to get his mind together or whatever. And he started thinking about how things will go tomorrow with this Ming Ling deal or whatnot and all of that. So he know he needed something to distract himself, because if he didn't, then he probably would just be thinking about Shayla all night. And he thought that a shower would help him get her off of his mind, but that didn't work. So he's just really fantasizing about her or whatever. So it's the next morning and it's time for the meeting, and he still couldn't understand why Shayla Kirkland was still on his mind. He couldn't shake this woman from his brain. He couldn't figure it out, but nonetheless, he pulled himself together, and then in walks Paul. And he was teasing Nicholas. He said, I actually saw you and Shayla last night when I came in to my room. I saw you and her, and man, boy, I tell you, she is a good looking woman. I could see why you a little shook. And he was like, whatever, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm here to do business. And he was like, Paul was just teasing him because he knows how Nicholas is and how much Nicholas is feeling her. So he was just saying, I'm just saying she's a good looking woman. And for some reason, Nicholas didn't appreciate Paul and his compliments. It was kind of like he was becoming primitive and just possessive. This feeling came over him or whatever. And so anyways, he was like, man, whatever, let's go ahead and get this meeting underway. Let's go in here and see what's what. So anyways, he goes in, and here comes Shayla, and she's looking all business-like and very professional, and she comes in and she's just working the room, and all the men are looking at her, and Nicholas didn't appreciate how all these Chinese men were looking at her, and he just didn't like that one bit. And she's just working her magic, and she's speaking fluently in Chinese and just exchanging business cards, just doing her thing, just really setting a good impression on everybody there. And Paul was like, man, I knew she would be an asset. Look how she's just working the room. Like, she's really doing a good job. Wow. And Nicholas is just looking back, and he's standing and he's watching, and he was like, okay, okay. And so now remember, Nicholas is not very knowledgeable of the Chinese language. So Shayla, he's entrusting Shayla to go ahead and negotiate and represent the company, while he was just playing it smoothly and just sitting back, trusting her with what they were talking about. So they were just exchanging business cards, and they're talking or whatever. And Shayla didn't really get the warm and fuzzily from the man in which Nicholas was there to do business with. There was something about Ho Shin that it just seemed shady to her. And she was right, because from her understanding, the deal that he was looking to partner up with Nicholas with, it wasn't a great deal on Nicholas' part. It would not have been beneficial for him with the amount and just how he was going about it. It just seemed shady, and she didn't like that. And so she decided that she was going to set aside her motives for 1 second and make sure that this man didn't really get over on Nicholas, because he had some things that was kind of shady that he wanted to do that wasn't going to be a great profit for Nicholas. So she said, I'm just going to have to just do something about this, because this is just not looking good. So she ended up putting her charm on and kind of like winning him over so that they can negotiate a better deal that was more in favor for Nicholas' company. And she works her charm or whatever. And of course, Nicholas is like, well, what are y'all saying? Like, he's having this look like, what are they saying? What? Because I can't understand anything that's being said, but he's still entrusting her. And of course, Paul kind of leans into Nicholas, and he whispered to him, he was like, what are they talking about? And of course, Nicholas was like, I don't know. And he was like, man, for all you know, she could be ruining your business and doing something shady. He was like, no, just relax. I'm going to trust her. Have a good feeling about her, that she's handling her business. And Paul was like, this is only her second day on the job. How can you trust her so much? And he was like, just relax. I think she got it. So anyways, after they were able to negotiate or whatever, Shayla turns to them, and she was just smiling at him, and she was like, okay, it's over. And Nicholas was frowning. He was clearly not understanding. He was like, what's over? And she was like, she was trying to be careful, because even though Mr. Ho Chin speaks Chinese, he can understand English. So she was trying to be careful with her words, and she was like, the negotiations, everyone is ready to sign. And Nicholas, he was like, wow, his head was spinning. He was like, to close the deal? And he was just so dazed by it. He was like, but how? Why? Like, how did you get them to like close the deal? Because from the looks of it, y'all were in deep conversation. Of course, I couldn't understand. And she just kind of like reached across the table and put her hand in Nicholas' hands. And everybody was observing, and it was definitely not a business-like gesture. So Nicholas, he kind of like lifted his eyebrows, and he was wondering what she was doing. So instead of pulling his hand back, as he first thought to do, he decided to let it stay put. And she says, I explained things to them, Nicholas. And she was meeting his eyes, and he was still puzzled. He was not comprehending, but he said, "What things?" And then the look in her eye pleaded him to pretend that he did. And he had missed that little cue. And he also didn't miss how she was calling him by his first name. And she was like, "I explained why you turned down Mr. Ming's invitation to dinner Friday night, his dinner party." And Nicholas, he lifted another brow, and he was like, because he knew why he had turned down the man's invitation to dinner, because he intended to be on the plane back to the States on Friday. And he was like, "Really?" And he said, What did you explain to them?" And she said, "I explained to them that you and I had made personal plans, and you thought you would be disapproving of me if you were to break them. However, in the light of everything, I assured Mr. Ling that we would be honored to change our plans and attend the dinner party at his home." And she just smiled tentatively at him, and she was just staring into his eyes. And she said, "Trust me on this one, sweetheart." And Nicholas, he kind of like blinked at the term of endearment that she was using. And he met her stare head on, and he said, "Oh, am I, darling?" So Shayla was kind of grateful that he was catching on. And so she released her hands out of his, and she turned her attention back to the gentleman. And all of them were kind of like blushing. Because in the Chinese culture, the only reason why you will turn down someone is first of all, it's very rude to turn down an invitation to someone's home party in Hong Kong. You don't do that. So she needed to think fast and quick because she understands the culture. And she knew that the only fitting reason would be because of them being engaged. So this is why she's doing this, playing this act. So they went on and they signed the documents and all of that, and everybody's glad it's over, and everybody's shaking hands and they're grinning, and they're walking out and they're leaving. And so she waited until they left. So it was only Shayla, Nicholas, and Paul in the room. And so when Nicholas was sure that the gentlemen were on the elevators and couldn't possibly hear a thing, he was like, "What the heck was that all about?" And she just gave him a deep sigh. She was just gathering up her papers from the table, and she was like, "That, Mr. Chenault, was about saving face. When Mr. Ling invited you to a dinner party at his home Friday night, you turned him down, not realizing the repercussions." And Nicholas, he frowned, and before he could ask a question, Paul said, "What's wrong with not going to the man's house for dinner?" And Shayla met Paul's inquisitive gaze, and she said, "Everything in China is an individual's reputation, and social standing is very important on them. So instead of making things complicated, she decided to save face. And turning down an invitation to a Chinese associate's home would be like a slap in the face, and you would lose any and every type of deal that you had set out to do. All your endeavors will be ruined." So that's why she did that. And he was like, "Well, dang, I'm sorry. I didn't even know that it was an insult to not accept a man's invitation." And she was like, "Well, yeah, it's fine. I know you didn't understand, so I had to think quick." And he said, "Well, I understand that. So what did you tell them?" And so she was like, basically, I told them simply that you and I had recently gotten engaged and that you wanted to get back to the States to look for a ring. That way, I made them think that the love had caused you to dismiss his invitation. So it wouldn't look intentionally rude. He was like, wait a minute. So let me get this let me get this straight. And he couldn't believe that she told them that. And Paul, he was over there snickering a little bit. He was laughing because he was getting a kick out of this. And Nicholas was like, so let me get this straight. So you told them that you and I are engaged to be married? And she was like, yes, what else could I do? I had no choice. I had to tell them something. I had to come to your defense really quick. So I had to be light on my feet. So we have to pretend, and they think that I'm your future wife. So I could make up for where you lacked. So he was like, okay, I see. All right. Well, he said, well, looks like I got to roll with this since you did get them to sign the papers. And I'm glad that you understood the situation very well. And Paul was really impressed with her as well. He was like, yeah, like I told you, she's a great asset. He was really proud the way that she handled it. So, she was like, believe it or not, most Asians credit blacks with understanding their culture better than white people. So, he just assumed that we already knew the culture of the way that it works there, you know. And so it was like, okay. She said, yeah, I know all of this because at Howard University, we had a history of publishing books from Asian American authors. So I learned a lot while I was in school with reading and studying up on them. So they was like, both Paul and Nicholas was like, okay, wow. Well, I'm happy that the Ling deal was closed, and they were extremely happy that they had Shayla on their team and how she kind of like just made it happen. So he was just thankful. He was just wonderful. So if he had to pretend that they were engaged, then so be it. He didn't mind it one bit. So then I think she questioned him. And she was like, and by the way, Nicholas, I know you questioned me if I had a significant other, but I want to ask you, do you have a significant other back in the States? And she was just looking at him, and the way she was looking at him, it was some intensity behind it. And he kind of like smiled at her, and he said, well, to answer your question, I don't have a significant other back in the States, Shayla, but it seems I do have a fiance while I'm here in China, doesn't it? So he says, I tell you what, why don't me, Paul, and you go out to dine to have this celebratory dinner and drinks? Let's do it, because, we have a lot to celebrate. And, Shayla needed to think things through because she couldn't understand that why she wasn't sticking to her plans to destroy Nicholas' company and instead saving his company. So she just wanted to sort through some things because she wasn't understanding why she didn't take that golden opportunity to ruin him. And she was like, you know what, you gentlemen go ahead on. I kind of got a headache, so I'm going to stay back and just go to bed early. And he was like, are you not feeling well? And she was like, no, I'm not. She said, I'm not. It's not that I'm not feeling well. I'm just extremely tired and I just got a headache. And she said, it's been a long day and it's kind of tense day. And I hope if the two of you don't mind, I'd like to go back to my room. I prefer to go back there and just order room service. And Nicholas, he was a little concerned and he was like, well, is there anything I can get you before Paul and I leave? And she was like, no, I'll be fine. You go on and you enjoy your evening. And so she gathered her purse and she walked out of the meeting room. So she went back to the room and she did take a nap. And when she woke up, she felt a little bit better, but it just kept weighing on her, that promise that she kept to herself to get revenge on behalf of her mother. So she needed to talk to someone, so she ended up calling her Aunt Callie. And when Callie answered, she was like, I couldn't do it. I had the chance to do it and I didn't do it. And she was like, oh, sweetheart, I'm so glad you didn't. She said, but I still wanted to. She said, I owe Mama. I really do. And I feel like I let her down by not taking the opportunity when I had. And so Callie was like, listen to me, Shayla, Glenn, Kirkland. When she says that, she means business. She said, don't you dare try to convince yourself that your mother would want you to embark on this madness. You know she would never approve of that. And she wouldn't be proud of that. And your mother and Glenn loved you very much. No matter what, they were always proud of you, but they wouldn't be proud about this. They wouldn't want you involved in what you're doing or trying to do with Chenault Electronics and JT Electronics. Please take my advice and take the next plane back to the States, sweetheart. So at this point, Shayla, she started crying and she was wiping the tears from her eyes. And she was like, I can't. I have to stay here for the party on Friday. They think Nicholas and I are engaged. And she said, what are you talking about, Shayla? Who thinks that? And Shayla was like, man, it's a long story and I can't explain it right now. We'll talk when I get back. And then we will discuss that. And Callie was like, okay, and when will that be? And she said, well, I'll be leaving out late Saturday or early Sunday. So she said, okay, sweetheart, well, remember what I said. Get out of this mess while you still can, okay, before you get hurt. And Shayla, she glanced up at the reflection in the mirror above the desk that she was at, and she was noticing how her hair looked a mess and her eyes were slightly swollen from crying. And she said, I'm fine. Really, I am. I just needed to talk. But, Aunt Callie, nothing's changed. That is something that I'm going to stick to. And there'll be another opportunity for me to ruin Nicholas' business. And she was like, Shayla, listen. And before Aunt Callie could finish, Shayla just said goodbye. And she hung up on her. She said goodbye and I love you. And so she hung up. Because her Aunt Callie really didn't understand how her mother was feeling. Because she wasn't the one who read the diary. Shayla read her mother's diary, not Callie. And she didn't know how her mother was feeling or what she felt, or she couldn't understand her pain, So she figured like her aunt just didn't understand. So she decides to take another bath just to soak and relax or whatever. And while she was running the water for her bath, she heard a knock on the door. And she looked out of the peephole and she saw that it was Nicholas. Because after Nicholas had returned from celebrating with Paul, he kind of like wanted to check on her because he knew that she had a headache and she wasn't feeling good. So he just wanted to make sure that she was all right. And of course, she decided to just ignore, his knock and not answer the door. She just didn't want to deal with him. So he figured like since she was tired and she had a headache when she didn't answer the knock, then he figured that she went to sleep. So eventually he stopped knocking and she knew he was gone. So she went into the bathtub and she was soaking there and she was kind of torn. She was like, dang, I can't even fantasize about him tonight. She's like, well, there'll always be another opportunity to ruin the Chenault business. And next time, she will not be no weakling and make sure that she follows through with what she set out to do. So when Nicholas went back to his room, he was just thinking about her and he began to become spellbound by her. Just the total amount of events that has been taking place in this whole place in Hong Kong. You know, when he first saw her at the first meeting, and then when she sealed the deal, and how she was working the room and just all eyes were on her. He was just, oh God, he was just so mesmerized at how strikingly beautiful she was. And he had to admit this was the first woman who had that sort of effect on him. And he was like, man, this is a first. She seems to be putting a first on him in a lot of ways, with a lot of things. And he just he just was just in awe of everything that was transpiring and taking place. Like, you sealed the deal with her by his side. He was celebrating. Everything went great and grand. This means more money, more business. Everything is just going good. So, of course, he calls Trent and he tells him that they sealed the deal and that he's so happy and excited about everything. And so I think he asked Trent to come out and celebrate with him or whatever, or something like that. And they're just making small talk, and he's just happy. So he also decided to give a call to Sterling, his brother, and tell him and just all the other people that he was close with how he sealed that deal over there, and how they celebrated and how happy and elated he is or whatnot. And he began to think about his brother Sterling and how he was so happy with his wife and how they had a child together. And he started thinking about his own, like his own life and the love that he was lacking or didn't have in his own life. He just began to think about that. And then he began to think about his mother and his father and their marriage and how they loved each other. And he was just feeling this empty space. Not empty, but he was starting to feel this new feeling that was all new to him, because he never felt this way before about any woman. They didn't captivate him the way that Shayla was. So Paul Dunlap was back in his room, and he was thinking about Shayla as well. I mean, he couldn't get her out of his mind for some reason. There was something disturbing about her, but he didn't know what it was at the moment. So he was trying to figure out if he met her before, because she looked or seemed very familiar. And he was wondering how sometimes when they would have interaction, how Shayla was always being nervous around him and all of that. So his alerts were kind of up a little bit. But he couldn't put his finger on what it was about Shayla that he couldn't pinpoint. But then again, he was looking at the fact that she did come in and how she's being an asset to Nicholas' company. So he didn't think too much of it, but he was going to get to the bottom of what it was. And then he started thinking about Nicholas and how he could tell that Nicholas was extremely attracted to Shayla, and how he was wondering how that was going to go between them. Like he could foresee them becoming an item, but he was wondering how that was going to work out as far as at work and with business. So he was just thinking about that. And then he started thinking about things back at Shinault Electronics and how things were running since he was out of town with Nicholas. He was just wondering if things were going good at the job now. Carl Stockard, of course, he was going to be in charge while Paul was away. But Paul was kind of suspicious of Carl, because Carl was taking his job a little bit too seriously, in his opinion. And he didn't really too much trust him. So he had another guy named Harris. Now, Harris is also another guy who has been with the company for a very long time as well. So when Paul went away to Hong Kong on this business trip with Nicholas, he had Harris keep an eye on Carl. And this is where things get tricky because Harris and Carl are, I don't want to say they're in cahoots with each other, but Carl has an agenda with Nicholas' company. He's trying to sabotage Nicholas' company because he wants to take over. And he just feels threatened by everybody. He wants to take over and kind of like be in Paul's stead because right now Paul is the head security and Carl wants to do that. And not only do that, he wants to just sabotage the business and try to make a good impression like he's the one that's solving these leads with who is trying to sabotage the business when he's the mastermind and the culprit behind these little happenings with the business or whatever. Because, I mean, it's just little things that has been happening. Because, like I said, Carl's only been there for 6 months. But here lately, it's just little things that's been happening, like viruses in the computer system and little things here and there. And Paul is taking a closer look at this behavior. So he's having Harris keep an eye on him. Now, there is a woman named Cindy Davenport that also works for Nicholas' company. And Cindy is a woman who always wanted Nicholas. Now, when Cindy initially met Shayla, she automatically had her defenses up because she's like, okay, who is this new heifer coming on the scene? And she could tell that, okay, she's attractive. And she can also tell from the exchange of looks between Nicholas and Shayla that it could possibly be some competition and she might get in the way of her trying to make her move on Nicholas. Now, she's been trying to get with Nicholas for a long time, trying to get him in her bed for them to sleep together, but Nicholas keep refusing and telling her that he doesn't get involved with coworkers. So Cindy and Carl are in cahoots with each other because they both have an agenda. They both are after something. Carl wants to take over, make a good impression so that he can be the head security. And Cindy wants to get Shayla out of the way so that she can get her grabs on Nicholas and have him all to herself. So they're working together on trying to scheme things and plot and twist things to make it seem like Shayla is the culprit behind all these little things that are happening with this company. So they're working up plans and plots to get her out of the picture. Well, Cindy got her agenda and plan to get Shayla out of the picture, as well as Carl. He got his plans to get everybody as far as that's in competition with him so he can be head security. Now, the person that Carl is trying to blackmail is Harris. Now, Harris, he's been married for 20 years, and I think he has 2 kids and a wonderful marriage, but he slipped up and cheated on his wife some time back, and Cindy Davenport was the one that he had an affair with on his wife. And not only that, she had a videotape of it. So, of course, Carl knows this because he needs someone to help him work with this undermining things that he wants to do. So he gets Harris involved. And of course, Harris don't want to get involved because he's been loyal to this company and he don't want no bad blood. He don't want no problems or drama. So he said, man, don't even think about including me in your little mess and your little scheming games that you want to play. He said, oh, I think you may want to cooperate with me, because if you don't cooperate with me, I'm going to tell your wife of 20 years just exactly what you're doing. And not only that, I'm going to show her the tape of you having an affair on her. And he was like, well, at that point, he had him by the balls. He really didn't want to do it. But I mean, he's scared at this point. So back at the company, there are some things happening. But here they are in Hong Kong celebrating and don't really know what's all going down back there at home. So So Paul is just reflecting. So he decided that he wanted to check on the business. Now, there is a location in Jacksonville and in Chicago, and he calls both of the locations to see how everything is running since he's not there and he's in Hong Kong. And from his understanding, Carl is handling everything and everything looks good. And so he hangs up or whatever. And so it's the next morning, and Shayla, I think she was getting ready to enter the elevator because she wanted to go out and have some breakfast and all of that and go shopping, and she wanted to go to the mall or whatever and try to get away from the hotel. And before she entered the elevator, she hears Nicholas' name saying, Shayla, hold up. So she had to swallow hard because here this Negro come. And he's in there and she could feel his heat and his eyes on her. And oh gosh, she was like, what is it? His masculine presence is just bothering her and it's overpowering her. And she just don't want to fight against it. And she had to admit that this man had a nice body because when he got on the elevator, he was dressed like he was getting ready to go work out. So she could see his arms and his muscles. And oh my gosh, his body, to say it's nice is an understatement. It looked better than that to her. And so that made her feel hot and bothered. So she's just in there and he's asking her, he was like, well, how are you feeling today? Are you feeling much better? And she was like, yeah, I got some much needed rest. Thank you, or whatever. And she said, thanks for asking. And so he was just standing so near her that she can almost feel like his erection. But I mean, he was erected because he was highly attracted to her. And then the way his voice was sounding, she just couldn't take it no more. So she couldn't wait till her floor came and his floor came, because I think he was on his way to the fitness room and she was on her way down to have breakfast or whatever. And he said, well, what do you plan to do for today? You looking kind of sexy this morning. So what do you plan on doing? And she said, I just plan to do a lot of shopping and all of that. And she said, of course, that is, if you don't need me, that's what I plan to do. And he was like, no, you deserve the day off, and I'm taking the day off too. So he said, yeah, I'm trying to relax. I'm going to go down here and work out or whatever or whatnot. And she was just saying, okay. And so out of nowhere, he just asked her, he was like, will you have dinner with me this evening? And she just kind of took a deep breath and she didn't look at him. She couldn't. But then she says, she started to turn him down, but then her mouth just said, yes. And well, he was like, okay, cool. I hope you enjoy your day of shopping. And she just couldn't turn around and look at him, because if she were to turn around and look at him, he was going to be able to detect in her eyes just how much she was intrigued and turned on by him. So she just said, and you have a great workout, and just walked off of the elevator or whatnot. And so he's going to work out, and he just he had to shake his head because he could not believe that he had asked her out to dinner when he made it a golden rule not to get involved with employees. So he was shocked at himself that it just came out of his mouth to ask her to go to dinner with him. So he's trying to work out and get his mind intact and trying to think of ways that he needs to get a grip on himself. But at this point it's too late because he already asked her out to dinner. And so after he gets done working out or whatever, he sees Paul um in the sauna, and he went into the sauna or whatever, and he just wanted to make small talk with him. He was like, "Hey, what's up, man?" Paul was like, "Oh, nothing, I'm just relaxing, enjoying this and appreciating the sauna or whatnot." He's like, "What do you plan to do today?" And Nicholas was kind of caught off guard, because he was like, I mean, he was paranoid because Paul didn't know what his plans were for that day. And he was like, "Man, I'm just planning to take it easy. What about you?" And Paul was like, "Yeah, I plan to do the same." And so Nicholas asked him, "How are things at the Shinnot Electronics?" And he was like, "It's going good. I actually called to check to see if everything was running smoothly with Carl." And he was like, "Okay, that's cool or whatever." And so Paul kind of like wanted to just kind of see where Nicholas' head was at. He was like, "Look, I've been knowing you for a long time and you can't get nothing past me." He said, "It's obvious that you are attracted to Shayla and Shayla is attracted to you. You're single, she's single, so what's the crime in you guys venturing it out to see what could happen?" He was like, "Because I mean, I don't date I don't date my employees." And he was like, "Okay, well, why don't you fire her so y'all can get this thing started, this ball rolling?" He was like, "Man, look, like I told you, it's nothing like that. I'm not going to act on what I'm feeling or whatever. Just, stop asking me about it." Actually, Nicholas was a little irritated by it, and Paul, he just got a kick out of it. He just was laughing, and he was just tickled by Nicholas. And so Paul just was laughing at him when Nicholas decided that he wanted to leave the sauna because he didn't want to answer any more questions that Paul may have had. And Paul was just laughing at him. He was just so tickled by him. So anyways, it's time for them to have dinner. But when she went back when she was out all day shopping and she returned to her room, she received like this huge, larger than life arrangement of cut flowers delivered to her. And it was from Nicholas. And she was like, "Oh my gosh, this is so beautiful." It was an exquisite floral arrangement. And it was so large that it took 2 hotel clerks to deliver it to her room. And the card, it read something, and it just simply said, "I appreciate your hard work, loyalty, and dedication." And it was signed with his initials. And she just could not believe that. I mean, that kind of threw her off guard. And she needed to find something to do to distract her from how nice he was and how he was just kind of like slow walking her down. And she tried to remind herself of the bigger picture. But as she was thinking, it was getting harder and harder and harder for her to do that. And she was getting confused at this point because there was no denying how much she was attracted to him. And she was just losing her sight of her purpose, her goal, her plan. And she was just trying to tell herself that this can't happen again. But lo and behold, that's not working. You can tell your head all day long to stop this, stop that. But your heart, it always wins. It always. So, anyways, Nicholas comes to the door because it's time for them to go out to dinner. So he's knocking on her door, and he's waiting there, and she opens the door, and when he sees her, he is so captivated by this pantsuit that she is rocking, and she's looking at him, and she's just noticing how good he's looking and how good that suit and that color choice of suit is, how it just compliments him in every shape, way, and form. And they're just looking at each other, and this attraction once again is explosive. So anyway, he takes her, and they're in the elevator. And as they're riding down to the lobby floor, they're like in total silence. They're not saying anything. They're just feeling each other's vibes, and they're looking at one another. And she begins to look at his hands and how big his hands are and what they would do to her and how they would feel on her body. And she began to look at his skin color, how his skin was so nice and caramel and just so delicious looking, and his eyes and his lips, she was just looking at him, and he was just staring at her, and they was just picking up on this vibe. And so as they get off of the elevator, he like touches the small of her back, and she just reacted to his touch, and he was like, wow. I wonder what would happen if I kissed her in certain places. And he's just having all these things in his mind. So when she noticed that he was going past the dining area at the hotel, he was like, oh, by the way, I hope you don't mind. I decided to take you out and get out of this hotel for a change of scenery. Hope you don't mind. And she was like, oh, no, that's great. So they get to the restaurant, and they're there or whatever. And this is where everything unfolds, because the reason why he wanted to have dinner with her is because, like he was telling her, if we're going to be at this dinner party for tomorrow night, we have to we have to practice what we're going to say, get our story right on how we met, how we fell in love, and all of this stuff. We want to make it believable. So this is why I feel like this dinner is necessary. And she was like, okay. And so as they were beginning to talk and stuff like that and share, they discovered that they had a variety of interests, same interests in music and movies and foods and down to sweets. And they just couldn't believe how much they had in common. And they couldn't believe the attraction that was undeniable. And at this point, she's coming to an epiphany like, dang, I know I set out to get revenge, but it's hard because this man is attractive, and he's nice, and he's polite, and he's courteous, and then he's daring, and I'm feeling his masculinity and his energy. It's going to be kind of hard to follow through with these plans, because at this point, she's peeling back the layers. They're peeling back the layers. And for her, the more she's peeling back, or the more that is peeled back, she's loving every minute and second of it. And she's just realizing, dang, this is incredible. So they enjoy their dinner, and it's time for them to go back to the hotel, and to get on the elevator. They are up there near their suites, and they're just staring at each other. And they both wanted to kiss each other because they were moving in closer. And she was trying to protest a little bit when he got his mouth towards her lips a little bit too close. And he said, well, look, we might as well get some practice in to see, if we share the same chemistry as far as when our lips touch. We want it to be believable, so why not let us practice? And before she could answer, he took her mouth, and he took her tongue, and the way that he was kissing her, it was so demanding and so sexy. and sensual and sexual, that really turned her on, because he surprised her by taking charge. He didn't give her a chance to respond to anything. And it was getting so hot and heavy that she had to hurry up and just break off the kiss. And she said, okay, I think we got it down pack, and I think that won't be a problem for tomorrow. And he said, I think you're right. And so she hurries up and go in her room and close the door. She can't take it at this point. She was like, I can't. This is difficult now. Now I'm in trouble, because that kiss is what unfold reality for her. She knew at that point there was no turning back. That kiss is what messed everything up. That dinner is what messed everything up, because she noticed that they shared a lot in common. So, of course, Nicholas, when he went in his room, he had to have her. After that kiss, he was like, there is no denying. I got to have this woman. I'm not going to fight it no more. There is definitely some strong sexual tension that he couldn't fight. And it just wasn't sexual. It was something more, because he found himself thinking about her all day and wanting to be around her every chance he got. And so when he was in his room, he hears a knock on the door. So he's thinking maybe it's Shayla and she changed her mind, but it was Paul. And he was like, what are you doing here? And how would you know that I was up? He said, oh, trust me, from what I witnessed like maybe 10 minutes ago, I knew that you weren't going to get any sleep. And he was like, man, whatever. And so he was like, what are you doing here, Paul? And he said, well, I just noticed that Thomas Jordash is here. He just arrived in Hong Kong. And so Nicholas was like, well, I told Trent, but I didn't think that Thomas was going to come. So, wow, okay, he's here. And he was like, yep. So I hope that everything can go smoothly, because him and I don't get along. And so Nicholas was like, I'm sure that you can be mature about it and you guys won't bump any heads. I think you need to relax and let bygones be bygones. But he was like, okay, whatever. So he leaves. So when he leaves, Nicholas had time to reflect and think about Shayla or whatever. And he had an epiphany that this was the first time in over more than a year that he had serious interest in a woman. So he was kind of shocked by that. So the very next morning, he did everything he could to avoid Shayla. He didn't want to have to face the music, so to speak. And he had decided to, like the previous night, he was going to go out to do some sightseeing. But after that night and how he was feeling this morning, he wasn't in the mood to sightsee anymore. So he decided to just stay in his room and order room service or whatever, and try to collect his thoughts and get himself prepared for the house party for tonight at Ming's residence. And that was going to be about 6 o'clock. So he was just wasting time, playing around or whatever, trying to see what he can do in between time. And of course, Shayla, she was in her room trying to think of what she was going to do to waste some time. And she was just going through her luggage, and she had bought a dress with her because she didn't know what all was going to happen when she went to Hong Kong. So she kind of came prepared for any type of occasion. She had dress down clothes, business clothes, and then extravagant like evening attire. And so she's just looking through on what she's going to wear for tonight, because this is like a really big meeting, and this is the first that they have to put on this show. Her and Nicholas have to put on this show that they're engaged, and that's her fiance. They're in love. So she wanted to look the part. And so she's just getting her things together and just trying to prepare. And so it's time for them to go ahead and get ready, and they're getting ready or whatever. And Shayla is looking absolutely drop dead gorgeous. She has on this amazing gown for tonight, and she just looks so royal and regal and beautiful. And Nicholas looks handsome as well. I think he had like a black tux on. He was just looking so good or whatever. So Paul, it's time for them to leave, and Paul goes to Nicholas' room. He was like, man, you ready? And of course, Nicholas said, yeah, we have to go over and get Shayla. So they knock on the door. And Shayla wanted to take her time before she went to the door because she was checking herself to make sure that she was looking good or whatever. And so when she opens the door, of course, Paul said, wow, you look beautiful. But Nicholas was just stopped dead in his tracks. He couldn't move. He couldn't talk. He couldn't even blink. He was just so fixated on her that he was just like in awe of how beautiful that she looked tonight. And so Paul was kind of tickled. He was like, hello, Nick, are you going to come in and move or whatever? Now, Shayla didn't expect for them to come in because they have to leave, but Paul nonetheless came in or whatever, and Nicholas was just standing there, and they both were just caught up in each other's energy. And so when he finally caught his breath, he just went to her and he was like, man, you look absolutely gorgeous. And she was like, thank you. So Paul is picking up on these two lovebirds or whatever. And they get to the dinner party. And as soon as these two go into this dinner party, they have to play the part. So he's extra close to her and doing more intimate things. He's like invading her space a little bit more than what was norm for him. And he liked it. Even though they were playing the part, he was enjoying every second of it. And she was too. And all eyes were on them and how beautiful they looked. And he was very angry that all these men were looking at her. Once again, it was like this possessive type nature was taking over him because he didn't like the idea of anybody looking at her in that manner and way. But he was thinking to himself, like, if I didn't know her, I'll be looking at her like that too. So they're just there and they're just enjoying each other and they're dancing with each other. They shared a dance and they're glancing at each other and then they kiss. And when they kiss, it just was undeniable at this point. So they decided to like cool off or whatever, and they're standing over there with Paul. And as they're all Paul, Nicholas, and Shayla was talking, Nicholas noticed Trent coming in. Now, this is where everything unfolds, and I'm going to bring it home because Nicholas, of course, said, excuse me, I have to go over here because I see my best friend. And, of course, when he goes over there, Paul and Shayla are standing right there. And Shayla just happened to ask Paul, like, well, who is that? And he was like, oh, that's Trent Jordash. And when Paul said Trent Jordash, she was like, okay. And she was like, Jordash? And he was like, yeah, that's Thomas Jordash's son. And she was like, oh my God, because she knows that Thomas Jordash supposedly is her father. So Trent is actually her brother. And so she was like, oh my God, what if they notice something? I can't believe that they're here. So she's kind of like getting nervous and freaking out or whatever. So so Paul began to break down the story about Thomas Jordash and how, we got to watch out for him. Our business needs to watch out for him because Chenault Electronics had a kind of a messy situation with JT Electronics. So he is kind of like our enemy. So we got to watch out for him. And she was like, So now things are getting complicated because here it is, this man that she's falling in love with, Nicholas, is tied to the people that she wants to get revenge on, that she's seeking to get revenge on. So it's like, okay, you're best friends with my brother. So things are getting complicated. And of course, Trent comes over, and of course, Nicholas introduces Trent to Shayla, whatever, and they're talking, and he's very charismatic and charming or whatever. And he was actually kind of flirting with Shayla, but Shayla was tickled like, this is definitely my brother, because he's very charming and charismatic, but he don't realize that he's flirting with his sister. But she didn't think anything of it, and they're talking or whatever. And so he was like, I heard a lot about you. I do understand that you are Nicholas' fiance, da 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 da. They just were making small talk. And she was like, yeah, and all this and that. And so Thomas Jordash happened to be over in the corner. He was looking at Shayla, and it was something about her that seemed very familiar. And he was just looking at her, and of course, Shayla was getting nervous because it was like she was thinking like, is he picking up on that I'm his daughter? Does he know something that she doesn't? So she began to get a little bit nervous or whatever. So anyways, Nicholas kind of distracted her and said, are you cool? Are you okay? And she says, yes, I am, of course. And so she said, I just need some air or whatnot. So they go over to this like little secluded area, and they're right there, and they shared a kiss again. And when they shared this kiss, sparks just fly. It just was flying everywhere. So they decided to call it a early night, because it just was too much going on between them. Their energies was too much to be standing in that room with everybody else, because they were going to make a scene. So they excused themselves, and he said, I want to retire early because I want to spend some more time with my fiance or whatnot. And they go back to the hotel, and he walks her to the door, and no question asked, he started kissing her and just kissing her. And she opens up the door, and they're kissing all through the door, kissing all through the room. And they get to the bed, and she says, there's something you need to know. This is my first time. And he was like, what? And she was like, yeah, this is my first time. And he was like, well, do you want me to stop? And she was like, no. And he said, are you sure? And she was like, yes. And baby, when he made love to her, it was, I was like, he is really giving everything he got to this woman. He made love to her so good that even though it was her first time, it was like his penis fit so good with her that it matched like a glove, and it didn't even hurt. And she was just enjoying every bit of it. And at that point when they made love, he was just calling out her name and kissing her. He was just very attentive to every inch of her body, just showing her what she's been missing out on all these years, and that you did right by having me as a first to make love to you. And oh my gosh, I was like, this dude is an amazing lover. Like he is not a selfish lover. Like he is an amazing lover, and he made love to her so good that she couldn't believe it. And they just practically all throughout the night were just going at it, going at it. And so when they finally took a break, there was a phone call he received. And I guess Carl, back at his company, said, we got a problem here. You need to get here as fast as you can, because someone set your business on fire. But it didn't damage everything, but he had to leave and go take care of the situation. So that kind of cut things short because they were supposed to leave the next day. So his business trip was cut short and their time spent was cut short. So he told Shayla, I gotta leave. I don't want you to think that I'm just rushing out, but I need to leave and go back and handle the business. Now, Paul, I'm gonna make sure that you guys fly out tomorrow together. And she was like, okay. And he said, are you gonna be okay? She said, yeah, I'm gonna be okay. That's fine. Go handle your business or whatever, like that. So he leaves and he goes take care of that business, and she's just sitting there, and now she realizes that she fell in love with him. Like after they made love, like she just realized I'm in love and it's complicated now and I don't know what to do. And so she's just thinking about that all night long. Of course, the next morning, Paul comes and says, well, are you ready? Or whatever. And she said she was going to continue to stay, and told Paul to go on. So Paul left and she decided to stay until her checkout time was or whatever. So she ended up catching a flight, and on this particular flight, Trent happened to be on the same flight. So her and Trent were talking or whatever, and she was like, man, I can't believe I'm sitting next to the connection to the man that I want to seek revenge on, and how nice he was actually. And so she was just feeling bad. She no longer was going to go through with her plans anymore because she said it's just cutting it close. The man I'm in love with, this is his best friend, and he's possibly my brother. And she said it's just cutting too close, so I'm not going to do it anymore. So to make a long story short, it's already been long, but anyways, to bring it to a close, what ended up happening is, of course, the culprit behind all of this stuff that has been happening at Chenault Electronics, Carl, he tried to make it appear that it was Shayla that was behind everything. But thank goodness, even though at first Nicholas thought that Shayla was the culprit behind everything, he ended up believing her. And not only that, it comes to find out that Thomas Jordash was really not Shayla's father. And Callie, her aunt, had some secrets to divulge to Shayla. Come to find out, Aunt Callie is not really Shayla's Aunt Callie. Callie is actually Shayla's mother. And Paul Dunlap is Shayla's father. So she had to tell her what really happened. Now, 27 years ago, when she got pregnant, her sister got pregnant too at the same time. So they both were pregnant. Eva and Callie were pregnant at the same time, and they were just so happy that they both were sharing this pregnancy. But anyways, Eva ended up having an accident and losing the baby. The baby died. And so, of course, Eva was devastated by this. Eva and her husband were devastated by this. And so was Callie, because she knew that Eva's husband could not be a father or give her kids. So Callie began to think, and she was like, well, at that particular time, Callie was not really prepared to have a baby because Paul ended up being mad at Callie for something, or accusing her of something that she was actually innocent of. He accused Callie and her sister Eva of trying to work together to destroy Chenault Electronics. And Thomas Jordash is the one who was behind that. And instead of believing Callie, he believed Thomas, and he didn't give Callie a chance to explain everything to him. And at that time when he dismissed her, she was going to tell him that she was pregnant, but he didn't give her a chance to explain anything to him. So with her not having Paul in her life, she figured like, I don't have no father figure for my child. I'm not married. And it would just be a ball of confusion. And here's my sister, she's married, and she would be able to give the child a loving family, a father and a mother. So when she gave birth, she gave parental rights to her sister and her husband. Okay. And they raised Shayla as the biological parents, when in all actuality they weren't. But Callie couldn't offer her what she felt her child deserved. So she made a promise that, okay, even though I'm giving my child away to my sister, I'll make sure that I always be in my child's life and be a part of it. That way I can always have her near and maybe one day tell her the truth when I'm in a position to tell her. But she never did. It had went on so long that she just never did. So when Shayla discovers this, of course, she is a little taken back, and she can't believe that Paul's actually her father and that Callie is actually her mother. So she's able to get through that. And I'm glad that Paul, even though it's been 27 years, he finally got back together with Callie. They reconnected, and the sparks and the love was still there. It's like it's never left them. And I was glad that they were able to finally get down to truth and finally have their stories told and things explained. Because Paul, he never married. He never fell in love with anybody else. He always thought about Callie as well as Callie. She never married or thought about anybody else because she always loved him. So they got back together. And what ended up happening with Shayla and Nicholas, he actually asked her to marry him. So they're going to get married, or they are married. They got married, live happily ever after. And Trent, now it also in the book, the author has a love story between Trent and this girl named Brianna. Now we know Brianna from a previous book. That is Corinthian Avery's best friend. So I think the author is going to kind of unfold Trent's and Brianna's love story. Now, Trent met Brianna on a ship that he owns. So that's why I tell you this book has too much going on. She had one too many characters all over the place, and I had to try to tie this all together, which was kind of difficult to do, but I hope it made sense. But yeah, everything got out in the open. Carl, the one who was the culprit behind trying to destroy the business, ended up getting locked up and found out what he was doing, as well as Cindy Davenport. And then with Harris, the one that was loyal, because he was the one who brought the attention to Paul. He ended up telling Paul and didn't care about whether or not his wife was going to find out about him having an affair, because he said, I just can't be disloyal to this company. So he was willing to take whatever risk he could to kind of like protect the company. So it kind of worked out, because when they arrested Carl wasn't able to blackmail Harris anymore. So Harris still has the secret that he never told his wife about, as far as the affair that he had on her. So I was just happy that everybody had a happy ending. This was a great story, yet it was too busy, but nonetheless, it was a great read. So I don't know who's going to be next within the next book, but we shall see. And I hope you guys enjoyed this long story, and there's more to come. All right, bye-bye.